So I've been told that my most recent SpongeBob scaling video just got debunked. So in this video, I'm going to rebunk it. Let's get to it. SpongeBob has demonstrated multiple moon level feats, including him transforming into a moon on several occasions. Scaling even higher, his planetary feats are staggering. He once drained the Earth's ocean in seconds, grew to the size of a planet itself, and even physically turned into the Earth. Beyond that, he's flipped the planet multiple times with ease. Characters comparable to SpongeBob like Patrick further solidified this tier of power. Patrick has survived Earth's complete destruction.
Right off the bat, this is already a really bad argument because it's kind of been established that all of this shit that SpongeBob can do is a result of his Toon Force. Toon Force is more of a hacks ability. It's not something that necessarily scales to your attack potency or your durability. So SpongeBob doing all these things would just be a result of Toon Force and thus would just be a hacks that doesn't exactly upscale him anywhere. Secondly, SpongeBob is really inconsistent with his feats. There could be one episode where he blows up a planet, but then the next episode he gets like shot by a bullet or something and he gets like sent flying into the Twin Towers. Obviously that's not literally what happens, but it is an example of something that does happen in SpongeBob. There's an episode that he's really strong and then the next one he's really weak. So this is more of a fact of inconsistency rather than SpongeBob always naturally being this strong. You can't just say that a character is planet level when they have really inconsistent feats, showings, and narratives of whether or not they are planet level. We can't just automatically take characters at their full power and just ignore inconsistencies. We have to analyze the consistency and the narrative of the series in order to come to a formal conclusion on where this character scales to.
Toon Force isn't a good argument to debunk SpongeBob, since it'd be your own burden to prove that all of SpongeBob feats are him using hacks or abilities to perform them, since you the one that made that claim. And for your inconsistent point, in the Toon Force scan that you yourself sent, it says that the ideal cartoons behave differently than the real world, but not randomly. It's virtually as old as animation. A cartoon's logic is governed by what makes sense, is consistent, rather than what is natural law. Which means all the crazy showings and feats that SpongeBob and his friends perform make sense and is consistent under his own world's logic, meaning that you debunk your whole entire argument with your own scan. Let's dive into SpongeBob's more extreme feats. Now let's tackle the feat that most of you guys already know, which is SpongeBob unraveling the entire universe. Strength-wise, this isn't really an impressive feat for him, since it's not his raw power, but rather the strength itself doing the work. However, the sheer speed at which he's pulling it to unravel the universe in seconds scales him absurdly deep into massively faster than light plus territory, arguably making this one of the greatest finite speed feats in fiction.
I've already made a YouTube Shorts video debunking this feat, so if you haven't watched that video, just go check it out. I'm probably going to link it in the description. But to give a summary of to what I said, what SpongeBob destroyed was not a universe. That was not a universe at all, and you can use inductive reasoning to determine why it isn't. Inductive reasoning is when you use empirical observations to come to a conclusion. When you actually look at the thing that SpongeBob destroyed, it more resembles a galaxy rather than a universe. So via empirical observation and via this calc right here, which literally only gets the feat to solar system level, we can just deduce that SpongeBob didn't actually destroy a universe, he actually destroyed a galaxy. This would also fall under abductive reasoning as well, as this would require less assumptions, as the evidence is just kind of right in front of us. So yeah, all three types of logical reasoning back up that SpongeBob only destroyed a galaxy. He did not destroy a universe. And even if I were to grant you this feat, again, this would just be a result of his Toon Force, which doesn't scale anywhere. Hell, I have a whole video on my channel literally debunking Toon Force and proving why it is a zero-dimensional hacks and it wouldn't upscale you anywhere. Toon Force does not scale anywhere because it is contingent upon something subjective, that being humor. Humor is what someone or a person finds funny, right? Or something to make someone laugh, which is completely subjective. What people find funny is based off their own feelings, beliefs, and shit like that. So therefore, Toon Force would just scale nowhere. It would have no objective value as it's contingent on something that's subjective, which in itself would have no objective value. Also, Toon Force is literally stated to be exaggerated, so therefore all of this shit that SpongeBob's doing would just fall under a hyperbole. One last thing before I debunk his next point is that SpongeBob doesn't actually scale to the string that destroyed the universe. Because if you look at the clip closely, SpongeBob actually got destroyed by this said string when Patrick used it to floss his teeth. So no, nobody scales to the actual string that destroyed the universe, which would further support that SpongeBob is not universal, even if he hypothetically destroyed a universe, because he doesn't scale to the thing that destroyed the universe in the first place.
Here's the debunk short that he's referring to.
And that's just 1% of SpongeBob's true power.
Nah, the glaze here is ridiculous. The fact people still believe that SpongeBob is fucking universal because of this feat is actually kind of insane to me. Let's go ahead and debunk this Homelander victim real quick. First off, let's go over what SpongeBob actually destroyed. When you look closely at what he's destroying right here, it's not actually a universe. For context to how the observable universe looks, it looks a little bit something like this. Now, if you look closely at the observable universe and at the thing that SpongeBob destroyed, destroyed, it more resembles a galaxy than it does an actual universe. To back this up, this feat is only calced to being around solar system level, thus SpongeBob couldn't have destroyed a universe. However, everything I've just said before is completely irrelevant due to the fact that the galaxy is completely fine in later episodes of SpongeBob, which would entail that the feat of SpongeBob destroying the galaxy never actually happened and was retconned. And since the feat isn't canon to the actual story of SpongeBob, this would scale SpongeBob nowhere. Let's just go ahead and see the rest of the bullshit this guy has to say.
It's more of the capabilities of his Toon Force rather than his raw power.
I don't think this guy realizes how badly he just shot himself in the foot. First, he states it was part of SpongeBob's Toon Force and not his actual power, which would mean that SpongeBob doing this would just be considered a hack, so it wouldn't scale to his actual AP. Also, if you haven't seen my Toon Force debunk, I'ma just go ahead and reiterate it. Toon Force is power contingent upon humor, and humor is subjective. Therefore, Toon Force has no objective value in power scaling and thus scales nowhere. So by saying this guy just debunked that universal SpongeBob feat to being zero-dimensional, as it's contingent upon something subjective, and subjective has no objective value and thus would scale nowhere. So yeah, SpongeBob is zero-dimensional and gets packed up by Homelander. Cry.
So if it wasn't obvious already, he's pretty biased against SpongeBob. Like, Homelander victim? Really? And just to be clear, I want to use a string feat to scale SpongeBob's speed, not to claim that he can destroy the entire universe in that moment. Strength-wise, this isn't really an impressive feat for him, since it's not his raw power, but rather the string itself doing the work. But the idea that only the galaxy was destroyed doesn't make any sense at all, because if that was true, we at least still see something in the background like other galaxies, stars, or the blackness of space itself. But instead, everything was completely erased into a white void, which debunks the whole galaxy level interpretation entirely. And honestly, you can even argue infinite speed, since he's later seen moving in a white void where the universe once was.
Holy non sequitur of doom, destruction, and demolition. Where does it necessitate that moving in a white void where the quote-unquote universe once was grant infinite speed? Where is this necessitated? Where is it stated that SpongeBob moved an infinite distance within a finite amount of time? Where is this stated? You never provided a statement for this, nor did you prove that this was ever even brought up in the first place, nor did you prove that this is even a necessity. So you're just out here making up headcanon and making baseless claims to wank SpongeBob.
My argument is not a non sequitur. And for everyone who's watching, a non sequitur is a conclusion or statement that does not logically follow the previous argument or statement, in which I stated that one can argue for SpongeBob having infinite speed, not that it was a definitive fact. And honestly, you can even argue infinite speed. This possibility is based off his movement within the white void that remained after the universe's destruction. Since the universe constitutes the totality of time and space, its absence implies a state where neither time nor space exist. Movement within such a void by definition will not be bounded by spatial nor temporal constraints, which is the fundamental concept behind infinite speed, aka able to travel finite distance in zero time. Now let's move on to SpongeBob's far more impressive scaling, his existence outside of his own verse, which is revealed to be nothing more than a dream of the dreaming dreamer. This Lovecraftian-esque being treats SpongeBob's entire world as a lower dimensional plane and as a dream, implying the dreaming dreamer in his realm operates on a 5th dimensional level, possibly even reaching the 10th dimensional status. And here's why. In one of the games, Bubble Buddy explicitly referenced the 9th dimension, which could either mean a 9th separate universe or a 9th spatial dimension. If we interpret this as the latter, it would place the Dreaming Dreamer's realm at 10th dimensional, making it high complex multiversal in scale. Of course, this hinges on how we define the statement, but the implications are staggering either way.
Yeah, go ahead and prove how the comics and the games are canon to the show of SpongeBob. Oh wait, you never proved this in the video? Moving on.
To start, canon by definition is the body of works that take place in a particular fictional world that are widely considered to be official or authoritative, especially those created by the original author or developer of the world. This definition establishes that Steven Hilbert, the creator of SpongeBob SquarePants, was directly involved with both the comics and the specific game that I was referencing, which is SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom, where Bubble Buddy discusses the 9th dimension.
Hey, SpongeBob! I just dropped by to give you a bubble hand.
Bubble Buddy.
You see, you're going to need to learn some new bubble-blowing moves if you're going to journey to the 9th dimension and defeat the giant monkey man.
Therefore, the argument of these elements being non-canon is completely invalid. Now let's examine the final feat. Patrick, a character consistently shown to be relative to SpongeBob, demonstrated the ability to tear the comic book itself. This is an extraordinary display of power.
Once again, you need to prove that the comics is actually canon to the TV show of SpongeBob. You never give evidence to support this within the video, so therefore this feat wouldn't matter. Even if I hypothetically granted you that they were canon, this wouldn't matter in the first place, as this could just be seen as like a fourth wall break. Is Lincoln Loud all of a sudden 5th dimensional because he talks to the viewer? No, that's just fourth wall breaking. That's the literal definition of what a fourth wall break is. This wouldn't upscale Patrick. This would just grant him fourth wall hacks.
This is is a complete false equivalence. A false equivalence is a cognitive bias where two things are compared as if they're equal when they have significant differences in quality and quantity, creating a misleading sense of balance and fairness. And Tom is comparing Patrick's physical feat of him ripping the comic book to the metaphysical awareness of an audience, as if they're equivalent. These are not comparable in quality nor in nature, making this comparison invalid and misleading, since Tom is pretty much equating someone who's aware of the fifth dimension to someone who can damage and interact with the fifth dimension, proving that characters within SpongeBob's tier can interact with and damage existences completely transcendent of their own verse.
Holy non sequitur of conceptual erasure. Where the fuck did you come to this conclusion? Because nothing in this games you provided proves that SpongeBob characters are transcendent of their own cosmology.
The crux of my argument, which you've already challenged prior, is that Patrick's ability to tear the comic book page constitutes as a metafictional feat. By interacting with the physical medium of the comic, he demonstrates a power that transcends the narrative confines of his own verse, operating on a superior ontological level. And the assertion that this is a non sequitur is unfounded.